A day can seem to have no beginning and no ending. It becomes a 25-hour day that blends into the one that came before and the one that is to follow. It is not necessary to be a military man to understand how long a day can be. A shot fired at Bien Ho, Da Nang, Quang Tri, Haiphong, or near Hanoi can strike home in any city, town, or hamlet of 50 sovereign states. 8,000 miles away can still be very close to home. And because it could come closer still, we share the conflict and the strength. We also share the understanding and the courage to prove that the honor of a nation's word has greater meaning than formal letters written on a scrap of paper. A man with a weapon is, if he is a reasonable man, a man with a purpose. The range of his understanding of his purpose reaches far beyond his line of sight. He knows the big picture. He understands that attempts to intimidate by force must be resisted by force before intimidation becomes a way of international life. And this he also knows. He and the thousands like him, fighting and sweating on the ground, are the spearheads of our Department of Defense total effort, an effort concentrated to help the men on the ground to achieve their purpose and their mission. Above field and jungle, close air support. Help clear the way for the man on the ground. Reinforcing. Return to care and safety, those who have taken as well as given. Support those men during the long hours of daylight and the longer hours of darkness. Support them with B-52s against concentrations of troops and supplies. Give the enemy no chance to rest. Support them with tactical fighter bombers to keep up the pressure and help destroy our enemy's ability and desire to attack. Support them with hundreds of thousands of tons by airlift. The supplies come through, but there are other lines of supplies that flow the other way along the Ho Chi Minh Trail. It winds down from the north through mountain passes and under the cover of green-top jungles. For North Vietnam, it is the lifeline for their aggression. Along the flank of southern Asia, the coastline of North and South Vietnam takes the form of an elongated S. A demilitarized zone between the two countries along the 17th parallel at the sea was established by solemn treaty. To the north is China. To the west are Laos, Cambodia, Thailand, Burma, India, and Pakistan. Moving down from the north, men, oil, machines, the tools of war, are fed along the Ho Chi Minh Trail to bolster the aggression in the south. They move by night over the narrow roads, through mountain passes, and along trails hidden by the jungle foliage. Trucks and pack-laden coolies by the tens of thousands. Usually, by day, they remain hidden in the jungle, to venture out again at nightfall, to carry their lethal burdens along their narrow lifeline of aggression. That lifeline must be severed. When it is repaired, as it always is, it must be severed again.
The infiltration increases in both men and equipment has required a very sharp increase in petroleum imports. Since the first of this year, the average monthly imports of petroleum into North Vietnam have increased 50 to 70% above the comparable periods in 1965. Stocks on hand prior to the attack were estimated to represent about 2 to 4 months' supply. The increased importance of petroleum to the enemy's military effort is further attested by his action to improve the routes of infiltration. Some of these routes are new, some have been widened, some have been upgraded for all-weather use. Bypasses have been built, and bamboo canopies or trellises have been built over the jungle roads in many places in order to inhibit observation of them from the air. A result of the greatly increased movement of men and supplies by truck and by motor-powered junks has been a shift from a small-arms guerrilla-type operation against South Vietnam to a quasi-conventional military operation which involves major supplies, major weapons, and heavier equipment.
Every gallon of fuel, every gun, bullet, even every ration of rice destroyed north of the 17th parallel may mean the life of a man on the ground south of the 17th. The military call it interdiction. That is the mission of those who fly to the north. Support the men on the ground by strangling the supply routes. They fly from the decks of our Navy's carriers. They fly from the surface of the land, the supersonic weapons of our Air Force's tactical fighters. They turn their noses north, north toward Mugia Pass, toward the fuel storage areas near Hanoi, north to interdict the trains carrying in supplies. The pilots do the flying. The ground crews keep them flying. It's an around-the-clock operation. Fly the mission, maintain the aircraft, repair the battle damage so that the next mission can be flown. No one counts the hours in a day. They keep close track of the months and weeks that they have left to sweat out to complete their 12-month tour of duty. But they don't count the hours in a day. All activity is monitored in aircraft vehicle control. Each operation is on a fixed time schedule. Often planes have to fly on paper before they can fly on missions. Nobody's job is easy, but then nobody ever said it would be. Every so often fellows will ask, why me? Why should I be here? One way or another, they have to find the answer for themselves. Usually they do find the answer. Then they have another question. What more can we do? The answer to that one is simple. Work your guts out for the men who fly the planes. A pilot's tour of duty is 100 missions.
100 missions to be flown. 100 targets still unknown. But it's my belief that my Thunder Chief strikes a telling blow to help G.I. Joe. Till 100 missions I myself have flown.
For the pilots, a day can start at 2:30 a.m. or earlier, or any time. Somebody's son, somebody's father, maybe everybody's hope. Never before has air war demanded such degrees of judgment and responsible self-discipline.
In mission briefing at tactical operations, information pinpoints refueling tanker locations and gives us our ordnance configurations. We'll get call signs and radio frequencies to use for the F-4Cs, and our own F-105s will be flying cover against possible MiG attack. Wing intelligence will have photos of our target area and what to expect in way of defenses. The anti-aircraft and small arms fire are heavy. Worse for us than the surface-to-air missiles, the SAMs, and they're bad enough. But destroying our targets will help cut the flow of supplies toward the south.
Furthermore, the daily tonnage of supplies moved overland from North Vietnam into South Vietnam has increased about 150% in the past year, and the infiltration of armed personnel has increased about 120% during the same period.
Before we suit up for a strike, each flight leader briefs his own flight. There are 4 in a flight, plus 1 extra, a spare, in case one of the 4 can't take off due to an aircraft mechanical problem. Our flight leader details our entry into the target area, and then our tactics for getting the heck out of there. We listen because we respect him, because he'll be leading the way in.
5 men in a small briefing room. Many groups of 5 in many small rooms. For maybe the minute and a half they'll be over the target area. They'll spend hours of flight planning and briefing. Pilots have always been fighting men. But to courage and daring, today you have to add the great technical skill and self-discipline demanded by their sophisticated weapons. But weapons no more effective than the men who fly them or those who keep them flying. Case in point, combat aircraft are maintained with a dedication that results in flying hours at a rate 3 times normal usage. The line crews understand how much depends on them day after 25-hour day. Normally, the spare is a very decent fellow. But now he's been through the hours of pre-flight details. He can't help but hope that one of the other aircraft will show up with a minor hydraulic leak or a cut tire. Sometimes that happens, but not today. Supersonic blasts of power in the open ocean of the air, ready to play their part in the overall coordinated effort. There are other flights in the sky. The F-4Cs are en route. At the same moment in time, the big choppers, affectionately known as the Jolly Greens, are on their way with A-1Es for their protective escort. Their object is to stay as close as possible to the target area, so that if a pilot in one of the attack planes has to hit the parachute, then they can move in to pick him up. If there's enemy ground fire, those A-1Es dive in to keep the enemy's heads down. The boys in the KC-135 tankers have been waiting to refuel the tactical fighter bombers en route to their targets. Those KC-135s will keep orbiting in case any of the boys run short of fuel on the way home. The overall coordination is the result of the total planning by the Department of Defense team effort, the Army, the Navy, and the Air Force. Most people will ask pilots the same question over and over. Aren't you scared? The answer is always pretty much the same. Sure, we're scared, until we button down the hatch.
We're a one-man sort of operation. We're our own navigator, radio man, radar operator, and bombardier. Getting into the target, we have to take evasive action. Then it's pop up, dive in, drop the bombs, and get the heck out of there. You watch your fuel. You go over in your mind what the intelligence boys will want to know about the results. At the target, the ground defenses, all the details. You might be scared when you start, but after that, you just don't have the time.
Results? Positive. The cockpit is a pilot's office. Management of that office must be as precise and efficient as the complex instruments with which it is equipped. One flight of many flights. And there isn't a combat pilot who doesn't know it. Every bullet, every gallon of oil, every mortar stopped north of that 17th parallel can mean the life of 1 man, 10 men, 100 men south of that parallel. Rescue Control has picked up a radio call for help from a pilot whose aircraft was hit and who had to eject. He has contacted the Jolly Greens and given them a fix on the downed pilot's approximate position.
I didn't realize my plane had been hit until the cockpit started filling up with smoke. I punched out. When that parachute blossomed, I took a long, deep breath. Then I landed in the trees, and I don't really remember how I managed to climb down to the ground. I let out a shout for help on my radio, then scrambled up the hill to get as close to the top as I could. I shot off some pin flares when I saw the A-1Es and the Jolly Green. It's hard to put into words exactly how I felt when I knew the Jolly Green was going to get me out. Let's just say I prayed a little, on my own account, and for those guys of search and air rescue.
100 missions to be flown. It's good to know you're not alone. If a shrapnel stump means I have to jump, then the Jolly Green will pick me up clean. Till 100 missions I myself have flown.
One flight's mission has been completed, but the long day's work is far from over. First will come the detailed intelligence debriefing at Tactical Operations Center. After the official debriefing, flight leaders hold a session for critiquing their flight's performance as a unit and as individuals. Was there a delay in acquiring the target? Did one of the men press too low? Did they regroup promptly after hitting the target? Was element integrity maintained? You can never stop learning. You might get away with an error in judgment one day. Tomorrow, you may not be as lucky. One flight of many flights. But operations continue around the clock. For the ground crews, it's 12 hours or more a day, 6 days or more a week. It could be drudgery if every man on the ground didn't know and understand that they are the ones who make it possible for those who fly to complete their missions. It's about 13:30 hours now, 1:30 in the afternoon of a day like every other day. Another flight takes off on another mission. Now, those who went out earlier have a couple of hours off duty.
100 missions to be flown, 100 bridges to be blown. On my left and right, the rest of my flight help keep me alive in my 105. Till 100 missions I myself have flown.
No matter what they do or how relaxed they seem, pilots always wonder what tomorrow's target will be. A milk run or a tough one? The answer comes at about 1800 hours, when flight planning for the next morning's strike starts. Usually, flight planning takes 2 or 3 hours. On a new tough target, that time can easily be doubled. A fragmentary order, FRAG for short, comes to the Wing Tactical Operations Center and is the small part of the overall order that relates to the fighter wings. The orders come down from DOD and the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Then, at wing level, they are broken down and missions assigned to the squadrons. There are many frags that make up a day's total coordinated effort.
We believe this essential to help safeguard the freedom of South Vietnam and to save the lives of those South Vietnamese, Americans, Australians, New Zealanders, and Koreans who are fighting to ensure that freedom.
The aircraft our pilots fly are compact, highly maneuverable machines. They have the inherent speed and versatility to be effective in air-to-air or air-to-ground combat. But they are only machines. They must be maintained. The record of keeping flying hours at a rate 3 times normal use speaks loudly and clearly for the kind of men who work with their hearts as well as with their minds and hands. Men are brave in many ways, and there are many ways in which a man can show his courage. Courage can't be judged by a casual glance or the sound of a voice. Any fighting man will tell you, you must know fear in order to find your true strength. Want a portrait of a hero? Take a snapshot of a pilot, or another, or another. Move your camera out to the line for long shots or for close-ups. Carry it inside aircraft vehicle control to watch the men who often don't even see the planes they help keep flying. Let your camera travel into the air to fly with the men of the Aerospace Rescue and Recovery Service. You'll never find a man who thinks himself a hero or even considers himself as particularly brave. But they all share a common bond and a common pride. They are all working members of the same fighting team, fighting each in his own way to try to slow down and, if possible, to break down the flow of supplies to the south and to adversely affect the will of North Vietnam toward carrying on their aggressive operations. The total task is large, and yet, as it always is, each small fragment of that total is very personal. Men may live 3,000 miles or more apart back home in the States, but here there are no state lines, no county lines, no country boys or city boys. No one asks their social position or who their ancestors might or might not have been. Nor do we as a nation know what we as a nation have done to have deserved men such as these. Perhaps they reflect the courage and the strength instilled in them by their mothers and their fathers. Perhaps it is the heritage of men who came before, men who stood at Concord Bridge, men who walked through Chateau Thierry, through the Ardennes Forest, and the undergrowth of Guadalcanal and Iwo Jima. Men who ranged the skies over Pacific atolls and over Africa and Europe half a world away. We do not know what we have done to produce men such as these, but we do know these are our men, our fathers, our sons, our brothers. It is only right that not only should we be proud of them, we can be proud of them.
It seems ironic that while our finest young men are fighting halfway across the world, other young men and women, safe at home, openly advocate abandonment of Vietnam to communism. Perhaps they really don't know what this war is all about. In the words of a battle-weary young Marine, they would understand if they'd cross this 10,000 miles of ocean and live with us. A day in Vietnam. This day, this trip, is not to delineate the why of Vietnam. Rather, it is to see the what and the how of our military operations, to give you a deeper insight into this war and the way it is being fought. While the coordinated effort of all Americans in Vietnam is vital to success, it is the young men of our Navy Marine Corps team that we will see firsthand today, down there in Vietnam. We've landed on the big airfield at Da Nang and will travel directly to the headquarters of the 3rd Marine Amphibious Force for a briefing by the operations officer.
Gentlemen, I will give you a brief rundown on our present status in Vietnam, together with a thumbnail sketch of the initial landings and subsequent buildup. As you can see on this map, the 17th parallel divides North Vietnam from South Vietnam. Militarily speaking, South Vietnam is divided into 4 areas. The 4th Corps area in the south, the 3rd Corps, the 2nd Corps, and in the north, the 1st Corps, or as we call it, the I Corps area. The area within this I Corps is approximately 10,000 square miles with a beach line or coastline of 167 miles. The 3rd Marine Amphibious Force is responsible for all United States military operations in the I Corps area. Located here in about the center of the I Corps area is our major operational base of Da Nang. You will recall that it was at Da Nang that the initial landings were made by the 9th Marine Expeditionary Brigade. This is now our largest operational base. At about here, approximately 50 miles to the south of Da Nang, is the operational base at Chu Lai. The Marines and the Seabees have built a small airfield for tactical support. Our third operational base is approximately 45 miles to the north of Da Nang. It is the base at Wei Phu Bai. Now, although the bulk of our Marines are located in or around these three bases, I want to point out that the Marines of the 3rd Amphibious Force have been fighting from one end of the I Corps area to the very other tip with so many new and different things for you to see, it is difficult to sort them out in any order. However, it's quite easy to choose what you should see first. Our Marines. They're the finest.
These Marines have just returned from a tough battle in the north. They are now in a defensive perimeter. Their weapons are cleaned and cared for before a thought can be given to personal comfort. A matter of importance in the life of a professional fighting man. This is neither a clean nor an easy life for our men, but they've learned to accept the physical hardships of battle as their fathers did before them. In their famous hymn, Marines recount battles fought in every clime and place. Here in Vietnam, except for snow, they prove it. From the soft ooze of the rice paddies, they move on through swift-running canals and streams. Then push forward into the jungles that fringe the mountains, where elephant grass tears at the skin while vines tangle the feet and giant trees cut off the sun. But it's not just a matter of long walks in the tropical heat. Each and every step must be a cautious one, for the Viet Cong have prepared the way with mines and booby traps. So watch your step. A false one and your ankle is pierced by the nails of a crudely cunning trap that only digs deeper as you fight to pull away. A hidden shell sits waiting for the unwary foot. And you'll never know which innocent-looking piece of grass or fern covers a pit of sharpened, poison-tipped bamboo spikes. Marine engineers must constantly sweep the roads and trails in search of killer mines. The troops must provide a screen of security behind which Americans can assist the Vietnamese in the revolutionary rebuilding of their nation. It is necessary to constantly patrol the outlying villages and countryside to deny re-entry to the Viet Cong. Marines initiate literally hundreds of small patrols and ambushes throughout the I Corps area each week. But one of the most difficult jobs in this war without a front is to distinguish friend from foe. Each person must be carefully searched and identified. Whether VC are turned up by such scrutiny or captured in combat, they are treated with scrupulous fairness under the international rules of the Geneva Convention. Marines have found that such treatment of an often cruel enemy frequently results in the proffering of information that reveals the whereabouts of an enemy force. In possession of such knowledge, Marines react quickly. Plans are rapidly formulated, and a striking force moves out swiftly. As they move in on the enemy position, they are met by intensive small arms fire. It results in some casualties, but the attack is carried to the enemy stronghold. The Viet Cong are well dug in. The command decision is to call for artillery fire support to dislodge them. The observer gives the exact location to ensure the safety of friendly elements close by. Now the troops can make the final assault and move in to destroy the enemy equipment and supplies. Many of the hamlets our troops approach are known to be friendly, but even they must be approached cautiously, for emotional reactions are primal when villagers are first confronted by men with weapons. A Vietnamese farmer's entire world is a thatched hut, a small rice paddy, his wife and children. For the past quarter of a century, his village has been a battleground, completely isolated by Viet Cong destroyed bridges and mined roads. The VC wanted food, they took his rice. They wanted soldiers, they shanghaied his sons. His village chief objected and was beheaded. His neighbors who protested were beaten. He can trust no one. The Viet Cong told him the Marines would come to seize homes, murder children, and enslave entire families. Anyone who helped Americans, the VC said, would be tortured and killed. So, quite naturally, trust and confidence grow slowly, nurtured by little acts of mercy, by promises fulfilled. Surely the stranger who binds one's wounds does not intend to murder, and always the Marine's first question is, what can we do to help you? When the Viet Cong have been driven out of the area, a combined action company is formed to provide security for the village. Marines and South Vietnamese popular forces, militiamen from the village, work and train together in this company. Their patrols and ambushes prevent Viet Cong reinfiltration. The villagers and their headman live unmolested. With this security, fear is replaced by hope and the desire to build for the future. Marines work side by side with the village people, constructing churches, hospitals, and schools. American generosity provides the building tools, even the very bricks and mortar. Through many civic action funds, and the Marine Corps Reserve Care Program is one of them, Americans are giving unstintingly to help in this rebuilding of a nation and its people. In classrooms such as this, children, and adults too, are learning for the first time of the vast potentials of our free and democratic system. It is on this other front in the battle to win the hearts and minds of the Vietnamese people that will be determined the kind of world their children, and our children too, will come to inherit. The Navy corpsman with his bar of soap and his bag of medical gear already is well loved by the Vietnamese people, symbol of America's helping hand. But he is only one of 100,000 Navy men committed to the war in Vietnam. For many of the Blue Jackets, it's an unusual new kind of shallow water warfare, operating fast, small boats, ground effects machines, and shallow draft transports. They hunt down and destroy the waterborne Viet Cong and act as advisors to the Vietnamese Navy as they move their troops along the water high roads for an attack on a riverside VC encampment. Just off the coast, other men of the Navy and Coast Guard are on constant patrol to stop and search thousands of small ships and junks. Many are carrying supplies intended for the Viet Cong. This blockade is known as Operation Market Time. It involves the surveillance of 1,000 miles of coast from the 17th parallel to the Gulf of Siam. Tough duty, but it's drying up one arterial lifeline from North Vietnam. Well offshore, in the deep blue of the China Sea, is the backbone of our Navy surface forces, the aircraft carrier. It's a floating mobile airbase complex. Over 4,000 men live and work on this seagoing city. To keep the ship in operation and its pilots in the air requires the effort of a community of freemen, engineers, clerks, doctors, mechanics, pipe fitters, radar men, cooks, and bakers. Their working day averages 12 hours. It can be 18 or even longer when air operations are underway and planes are being sent aloft at 30-second intervals. about half of all the combat sorties over North Vietnam have been flown by Navy and Marine pilots. It's a dangerous job, and sometimes not all the planes come safely back. A search and rescue helicopter hurries on its way when that radioed distress call, Mayday, signals a pilot in trouble. He could be down in the open sea or deep in the jungle. Their job is to find him and bring him back. On this mission, photographed by a Navy cameraman, the pilot was forced to eject beside a rocky cliff along the forbidding coastline a few miles south of Haiphong. The helicopter cannot get close enough for a direct lift, so a swimmer hits the water. Search and rescue is costly, difficult, and dangerous, but the value placed on a single life makes any effort worthwhile. Many other ships accompany the carrier. One such is the destroyer, the tin can, workhorse of the fleet. Indispensable to the Marines ashore and the Navy at sea. In Vietnam, the skillful placement of supporting fire from destroyers has often been a vital factor in the success of Marine infantry operations ashore. Another fleet operation in the South China Sea is the Amphibious Task Force. It supports teams of Marines and their helicopters that collectively are known as the Special Landing Force. The SLF operates from a specially designed ship that is a combination troop ship and helicopter carrier called an LPH. With almost lightning speed, the Special Landing Force can strike from the sky by helicopter and across the beach by amphibian vehicles in a highly effective two-pronged assault. The SLF has been employed at many points along the coast of South Vietnam. These Marines are part of the air attack group in the operation in which we're going to participate today. As they head toward land and a new battlefield, the minds of the fighting men are occupied with their own thoughts, their own prayers. Even for those who have taken part in many previous operations, the race toward a new unknown always carries with it that special feeling in the pit of the stomach. We fly above the beach assault force, for our helicopter landing zone is well inland, behind the enemy position. We expect to catch him by surprise. The helicopter force will block him from escaping toward the west, while the beach assault group offloads swiftly, then moves inland to play the hammer against the anvil. Marines push through the jungle, they must overcome natural obstacles as well as the enemy hiding someplace in the dense growth. A river to cross is a welcome coolness, but its waters support a myriad of leeches that slip inside clothing to fasten on the skin. The wounds they leave are easily infected in this tropical climate. In deep jungle ravines, the troopers slip down and climb back endlessly for every foot they advance. Now you are with them, and watch where you step and where you grab. A movement in the shadow beneath you could be a vicious giant rodent. A harmless-looking vine might be a poisonous snake. Even the trees in this rainforest are hostile. They grow so thick their triple canopies bring darkness at noon. Hang on to the man in front of you, or you're lost in this midnight gloom. Then, suddenly, out of the misty darkness, contact. The enemy has good position and appears to be superior in numbers, so the Marines call in their equalizers, their support from the sky. This is the moment for which these pilots have been prepared, for which they've been ready and waiting. Approaching the target area, contact is made with the forward air controller. This Marine is an aviator attached to a ground unit. He gives the pilots all the information they need to provide pinpoint close air support for the ground troops, a Marine Corps specialty. Needed to even up the odds, and the infantry action is positive and powerful in destroying the remaining enemy. We have our casualties, but our fatalities from combat-inflicted wounds have been cut to less than 2% because of the speed with which a wounded man can be moved from the battle zone to skilled surgical help. While the Navy corpsman gives emergency aid, a medevac team is being brought in by that mechanical angel of mercy called a helicopter. Usually less than 30 minutes after being hit, a seriously wounded man is in the operating room, either at a field hospital or aboard the USS Repose, a hospital ship that has been a welcome addition to our medical facilities in the combat zone. The gleaming white ship carries everything that would be found in the most modern hospital ashore. A full staff of doctors, nurses, and corpsmen functions with the same efficiency as the crew that moves the ship into the area where the action is. Though battle wounds are the cause of most of the serious casualties, there are many more that result from the environment. Heat prostration, immersion foot, malaria. These can be as devastating to our combat effectiveness as bullets or pungi pits. But the knowledge that quick and sure care is close at hand helps keep morale high in the rice paddies. But the Red Cross, which symbolizes our medical units, is not the only cross in Vietnam. Wherever the Marines and sailors go, the chaplain also goes. Whether it is for moral and spiritual counseling, a friendly word to a lonely man, or the softening of unpleasant news from home, the chaplain is on the scene. Be it a stretch of sand or a clearing in the jungle, it becomes a church as he sets up his altar. The men gather to worship in the same familiar routine of devotion as their families back home. As he holds service, the chaplain cannot dismiss the thought, will they all return? He knows full well they won't all come back alive. Prayers are said, a letter is written home to the family, yet so little can be done for this one who was given so much. There will be no more tales of his exciting adventure in a far-off land. No more plans for his education, his family, his home. He may have been a lad, not quite a man in years, but he gave us a man's greatest treasure, his life, and he gave it not unknowingly. These men prove every day they understand the why of Vietnam. Listen to a few letters written home by these young men, some of whom have since been killed.
Those boys who are burning their draft cards, marching in protest, getting married, and hiding behind an education just show me that they aren't mature enough to accept the responsibility of being an American, and therefore they don't deserve to be called Americans. Mom, I don't want to die over here, but if there's what it takes to make the world a better place for you and Dad and everyone to live, then giving my life won't be in vain.
This is the end of our day in Vietnam. A glimpse of the war as it is being waged all day, every day, by these young men who are growing up in a hurry. 18, 19, 20 years old. They were boys when they got here. They've become men overnight. The suffering, hardships, and sorrow they bear, not only their own, but what they see in others around them, has helped to make them compassionate, tolerant, and mature. The young men who comprise the vast bulk of our Navy and our Marine Corps, who are seldom seen on television, who are rarely interviewed by the press, these men are, as they have always been, the truly strong men of our nation. Only a couple of years ago, these young men would have been embarrassed to tell what patriotism meant to them, how much they loved their homes, their God, their country. Now they daily risk their lives for their beliefs. This vast cross-section of America, it's young, tired, gallant fighting men. This is not only the face of America, this is the heart of America. They will return, most of them, but that valiant heart will keep beating only if it is nourished and sustained by the rest of America. And these, then, are the true heroes of the war, the young men of your Navy and your Marine Corps. Whatever they are, and ultimately, whatever our country is, we owe to them and their brothers in the other services, past, present, and future.
I am General Paul D. Hawkins, commander of the U.S. Military Assistance Command in Vietnam. Here today, the U.S. Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marines are joined together in a common effort to help this country. Nowhere in the world today are we more aware of the inseparability of the problems of a people involved in fighting a war and building a nation than in Vietnam. For here is the rendezvous of all the historical forces in this century. The communists have long sought to take over in Vietnam, and the first phase of struggle after World War II resulted in the North-South partition directly reflecting our divided world. Now, this young nation, remaining on freedom's side, is engaged in a war which is as hidden and stealthy as it is relentless and exhausting. Responding to the request of the Republic of Vietnam, the United States has come to help, as we have helped and are helping all free people who seek to defend themselves from the communist scourge. The U.S. effort to our Vietnamese allies is a vast and comprehensive one. It involves political, economic, psychological, and military measures. All of the armed forces of the U.S. play a part. Because our efforts here are so comprehensive, the whole story cannot be told in 30 minutes. Today, our focus is on the U.S. Army Special Forces, one important part of our overall effort.
I'm James Arness. During the next 30 minutes, you're going to meet a remarkable group of Americans, members of the United States Army's Special Forces on duty in South Vietnam. The Republic of Vietnam, on the eastern edge of the Indochina Peninsula, is about as far from home as an American can be while still on Earth. When it's 7 o'clock in the morning here in Saigon, it's 7 o'clock the previous night in New York City. Army Special Forces were sent to Vietnam because they're experts, specialists in training men to fight a special kind of war. It's a dirty war, fought without uniforms on a battlefield without boundaries. A war where the friendly farmer you pass in a rice paddy may become a murderous enemy the instant the sun goes down. Sunset is beautiful in South Vietnam, but then night comes. And at night in Vietnam, men die. The communist guerrilla lives off the people, by persuasion if possible, but if propaganda fails, by terror. Fear and propaganda have turned the isolated villages of Southeast Asia into a theater of war, a war which can only be won or lost by the villagers themselves. What Americans can do is combat fear by giving them guns and the training they need to defend themselves against terrorism. And we can reply to the propaganda by actions. We can bring to these remote areas some tangible proof that the way of life we propose is a good life, worth fighting for. This is the story of a small group of Americans who are quietly trying to do that job, now in the swamps and jungles of Vietnam. Wars come in various sizes, wearing different labels. But one thing they all have in common: the innocent suffer. The guerrilla warfare being conducted against the Republic of Vietnam by the Vietnamese communists, the Viet Cong, isn't new. We saw it with minor variations in China, in Malaya, in Greece, in the Philippines, in Cuba, in Laos. It's a kind of war which recognizes no non-combatants. In Vietnam, the communist guerrillas promise progress, yet their favorite targets for assassination are school teachers, doctors, engineers, anyone trying to do today what they promise for tomorrow. Life will be lived on their terms or not at all. What happens to Vietnam will depend in the end on who wins the villages. And the government of the United States is determined that it won't be communist guerrillas. This is Major General William B. Rawson. He was then a brigadier on a recent visit to a strategic village high in the mountains of central Vietnam. As Special Assistant to the Chief of Staff for Special Warfare, he has come to inspect the village defense system, established here by a 12-man Special Forces team, a handful of Americans who in a few short months have converted a remote, guerrilla-infested highland plateau into a major training center of anti-communist tribesmen. We asked General Rawson to describe the war in Vietnam and the role of the Special Forces soldier.
There are many terms which might be used to characterize the conflict now occurring in Vietnam. For the general public, the best known probably is guerrilla warfare. However we refer to it, there can be no question that armed insurgency on a large scale is taking place aimed at the destruction of a people's national independence. It is the policy of the United States government to advise and assist the people of the Republic of Vietnam in their struggle to defeat the communist insurgency which strives to eradicate their freedom. The American soldiers you will see in this film are part of our assistance effort. As members of the U.S. Army's Special Forces, they are among the most highly trained military personnel the world has known. Each of them has been trained in a variety of skills which in more conventional organizations would be distributed among 2 or more individuals. These soldiers possess the capability of going to remote, primitive regions of the world to live with the people, eat their food or share their lack of it, learn their language, their customs and taboos, and win their confidence and respect. The future of such areas as Southeast Asia ultimately may be determined by events taking place in remote jungle villages which appear on no maps, by acts of violence occurring only under the cover of darkness, by wars which can be won or lost before the world is aware that a war has even begun. This film documents a small part of what the armed forces, and particularly your Army, is doing to assure that such conflicts, wherever they may be forced upon us, can be resisted successfully by ourselves and our allies.
I'm Captain Ron Shackleton, Detachment Commander of the Special Forces personnel in this area. American advisors first began laying the groundwork for village defense in this region in September 1961. At that time, the villagers in this area were almost completely defenseless against the predatory tactics of the Viet Cong, the Vietnamese communists. Out of fear, these mountain people were forced to both feed and house roving Viet Cong patrols, and their young men were often forced into Viet Cong activities in order to protect the lives of their families. Our effort during the months we have been here have been to teach the mountaineers, who call themselves the Rade people, that they are capable of defending themselves against such tactics, that they need not be afraid. We have shown the Rade how to build stockade-type fences and how to maintain 24-hour security. This is Master Sergeant John Slover, who has just returned from observing a patrol. Through an interpreter, he will comment on his observations.
Edway, tell the patrol that they did a very good job today. There's just one point I want to stress. Some carried their weapon down like this. Carry their weapon out the ready at all times. Where their eyes are, so is the muzzle of their weapon.
Not all our advisors rely on interpreters. Here we see Sergeant Bill Belch instructing the carbine in fluent Vietnamese.
Đây là khẩu súng carabine là K30. Trước khi Hảo lắp và tháo khẩu súng này, tôi sẽ nói qua về những tính cách của khẩu súng này. Muốn bắn chết một tên quân địch, các anh có lẽ chừng 300 thước thì được với khẩu súng này, nhưng xa hơn thì chắc là không được. Nhưng mà thường thường trong những khu vực như thế này, như là rừng hay là có nhiều cây, thì thường thường không trông thấy xa được. Thế thì nếu một tên quân địch gần.
Basic instruction in the care and use of a weapon, familiar to any veteran of the U.S. Army. In this class, one of our raw day instructors is teaching his men a technique in search and seizure for arresting Viet Cong agents. Many such agents conceal themselves in friendly villages disguised as ordinary workmen. These men are from surrounding villages. They have come to our village seeking training which will enable them to provide their own defense against guerrilla bands. It is not unusual to see 200 or more of these people each week. Outside the village gate is a sign which says, "Here no Viet Cong need apply for rice or any other assistance, that this is a free village which is no longer afraid." We have taught our friends small unit tactics and given them modern equipment with which to defend themselves. People who once defended their freedom with a crossbow are now learning to use rifles, submachine guns, and grenades.
Đại dân. Bên dân. Ma patangan. Ma. And up, now. Ebat, bat. Da, doa, 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 da, doa.
Today, these Rade people, who are in some ways very primitive by American standards, are among the best anti-guerrilla fighters in Southeast Asia. As our program expands, new Special Forces teams are moving into other villages, always with the same goal, to teach people who value their independence how to preserve it.
Okay, Odie, your boys got all your equipment. You're all set to go just about now, aren't you? Okay, fine. Well, you know that we're going to have trouble to the south. When we first set the circle up here, VC didn't know what we were doing. It took them about a month to really figure out just what we're about to do there. So when we move to the south, they already know just about what we're going to do. And once we start building up the same defensive systems we had up here, they're going to try and hit us as soon as we start. So we're going to have to watch that.
Well, Odie, for the past couple of weeks, you and your team have been here observing my team work with the Rade people in village defense. You've been exposed to some of our training problems, our logistical problems, and some of the problems that arise from working through interpreters. If there are any questions that you or your team have at this time, or any other way that we can help you, please feel free to ask.
Thank you, Ron. The last 2 weeks have been very beneficial as far as our team is concerned. We've learned a lot, as what you mentioned, the interrogation and so forth, and the training with the Rade, working through interpreters. And one point that you can help us with, though, is on this field headquarters there you've got set up. Where we're going, we'll probably be working decentralized training rather than centralized, and the results you have may help us down there. But when we go to the other area, I'm afraid that we're going to have a few more problems down there that we don't have here. For example, a different tribe, and plus we're working with 2 different types of group of people, the Vips and the Merrill tribe. And we can take what you have given us here and then modify it to meet the situation down there. As far as equipment-wise, I think we pretty well got everything you had. How about lesson plans and training schedules there?
We're okay on that, but we'll probably have to make some changes as our situation goes along.
Okay, Van, how about the commo situation? It's pretty well in hand?
Well, we'll try the same system they're using here. If that don't work, we'll change it.
The villages of Southeast Asia were old in the days of Julius Caesar. Throughout their long history, they've been regularly conquered, oppressed, liberated, and invaded again. In the best of times, lives here are neither long nor easy. Maybe it's not surprising that the villagers of Vietnam have simple ideas about what makes a friend. Friends are people who help. Medics of a rather special kind are part of a special forces team to care for their own men. But in isolated, often disease-ridden hamlets where no doctor has ever gone, a special forces medic with his extensive specialized training may be the only contact with modern medicine the people will ever have.
Okay. I'll give her this slip here, write down the medicine, and she can pick it up.
The use of military personnel to win friends as well as to fight is gaining ground in Vietnam. A villager is likely to be more interested in a new roof for his house than in the outcome of the Cold War or the threat of communism. The training and advising of Vietnamese civic action teams for work in the villages of Vietnam may be one of our major contributions to the defeat of communism in Southeast Asia. But if good works are an answer to communist propaganda, they're not enough to repel the guerrilla terrorism which invariably follows when propaganda fails. This is the village of Hoc Thien, near the coast of the South China Sea. By refusing food and volunteers to Viet Minh guerrillas, these villagers subject themselves to 250 guerrilla attacks in 5 years. That's an average of 1 a week. They're about to show an American visitor how they survived. A typical alert, which here is more often real than practice. The village has been organized into a small fort. When the alert sounds, every man, woman, and child has either a place to hide or a post to defend. They've defended it so well that guerrilla attacks have virtually ceased. The price of extorting food and supplies has become too big for the guerrillas to pay. And it's worth remembering that they did this all on their own. Americans are now giving them weapons and technical advice. But in this case, we're only making a good thing better, and maybe making life a little easier for a town full of brave people. All the bravery in the world won't win a war from behind a stockade fence. Sooner or later, you have to take the fight to the enemy, whether he's an army or only a band of guerrillas prowling the surrounding jungle. At a Special Forces training camp outside Saigon, volunteers from the village of Hoc Thien are training to carry their war outside the gates. These training missions can be interesting. The jungle is never safe. And when you practice searching for guerrillas hiding in jungle villages, you're always liable to find some. In this school, nobody has trouble keeping the students awake. A moment's carelessness can lead to disaster. You don't cross a clearing, pass a temple, or walk through a cemetery without making sure. Natives of the Vietnamese highlands have nothing to learn from Americans about jungle living. But they do need help in mastering the tactics and using the modern weapons which communist-trained guerrillas are using against them. Like mountain people everywhere, they are natural soldiers who learn fast. These are men of the Nung Chinese, training at a Special Forces camp near the town of Da Nang. They're already some of the most experienced anti-guerrilla fighters in Southeast Asia. In 1954, 25 of these same men turned back an assault by 1,000 Viet Minh soldiers, killing 600 in the process. These are mountain people of the Katang tribe. They and their U.S. instructors are drawing rations of dried shrimp and rice for a week-long jungle patrol, a joint training exercise with soldiers of the regular Vietnamese army It will have the added practical advantage of making life difficult for a battalion of Viet Cong guerrillas who happen to be using the same jungle. The main problem in taking the fight to the guerrillas in Vietnam or anywhere else in Southeast Asia is terrain. Ordinary means of travel are too slow to counter the hit-and-run tactics of communist guerrillas. One answer to that problem is the helicopter. Helicopters manned by pilots trained to fly at treetop level can bring troops into a guerrilla-occupied area the moment their presence becomes known. The helicopter also increases the staying power of the anti-guerrilla patrols. With fresh supplies of food and medicine available in the heart of the jungle itself, patrols like these can cover a lot of territory, stay until they find what they came for. The communist guerrilla is beginning to learn that there are fewer places to hide in the jungles of Vietnam. Some of the Viet Cong guerrillas are hardcore communists, prepared to die for a cause in which, unfortunately, they sincerely believe. But the Viet Cong also includes men, many of them, who only want an alternative. Men like this young Rade tribesman, who a few days ago deserted the guerrillas and came to a Special Forces team seeking protection.
His name is Trung, 22 years old.
How long has he been with the VC?
Đâm lan ở độc Hồng Việt Minh.
Độc Việt Minh đoam lan, nan xa làm nan đoa.
He has been with the VC 2 months since January.
Why did he join the VC?
Sinh ngạc lại ở độc Việt Minh.
Còn độc Việt Minh cứ ta sẽ nhung mạc ho, go, rồi có mà nào em dê.
He joined VC because VC forced him, pressed him to go in jungle.
Why did he desert the VC?
Nhưng ngạc lại cái là đội mang Việt Cong.
Có cái đoạn mà Việt Cong, người ta có mà đi kia, một cái nắp nhai. Để chữ trang, quy brand quẹ.
He deserted VC because he does not like the life of VC. And he treated badly many people, steal rice, and work hard.
Why did he come to our specific training area?
Sinh ngại chẳng khởi cái bên nào này.
Có rê bên nào này, người ta có một hình. Vợ bên nào này, pray cơ, play nghe công đi bên sang.
He come here because he knows that program in Buenao is for Rade people and for Rade benefit, and he want to work here to help Rade people to have better life.
How large was the group of VC that he was with?
Đâm châu phong Việt Minh bật hỏi.
Việt Minh độc biết có Phạm Lô Châu.
40 people with him.
It will be a long while in Vietnam before any swords are beaten into plowshares. But the time will come. What the people want is peace. Peace and a chance for a better life. The communist Viet Cong promises them progress, but in the meantime, creates a world where peaceful citizens must go armed in fear of their lives. What the Viet Cong guerrilla really wants is power. What he can't control, he tries to destroy. In South Vietnam, the old promises don't work as well as they used to. And so the guerrilla resorts more and more to terrorism, is at war with his own people. The Vietnamese are an ancient race and an independent one. This is not the first time they've fought for the right to decide their own destiny. For 2,000 years, they've defended that right against all the emperors of China, against the cavalry of Kublai Khan, against modern armies using machine guns and airplanes. Given time, they will send today's would-be oppressors to join the others in defeat. Our purpose in Vietnam is to give them that time.
The history of the 1st Division, the Big Red One, begins as far back as the Revolutionary War, when its Battery D of the 5th Field Artillery served under Captain Alexander Hamilton. This battery has the longest record of continuous service of any unit in the United States Army. Its history runs parallel to the history of America. The Fighting First was organized as a division in World War I, when it scored the first American victory of the war at Cantigny. In the great battles of Soissons, Saint-Michel, and the Meuse-Argonne, it helped smash the German army and end the war. During World War II, the 1st Division, true to its name, was in the first waves of the invasions of North Africa, Sicily, and Normandy. It smashed across France and Belgium in bloody fighting, was the first to enter Germany, and helped stop the Nazis in the Battle of the Bulge, in the drive to the final victory in Europe. 20 years later, when communist aggression in South Vietnam threatened the peace of Southeast Asia, the first full U.S. Army division sent to meet the challenge was the Big Red One. The Vietnam engagement was to be the longest and in some ways the most arduous of the wars fought by the 1st Division. But as always, the division lived up to its great heritage of valor and success in battle. The arrival of the first Big Red One troops in Vietnam in July 1965 was very quiet and efficient. They were moved swiftly off the beach at Cam Ranh Bay and sent to various base camps in the Saigon area. The first task was housekeeping and setting up defense perimeters. Then patrols, not only to clear the area around the base camps, but also to harden the men to the difficult climate and terrain. In all the varied combat history of the 1st Division, it had never fought in the soggy, humid climate of the tropics, or in the tall grass or thickets of the jungle, or in its rivers and swamps. The foot soldiers were inducted into airmobile patrols. There was contact with the enemy, so that they learned something about his guerrilla tactics. But there was no big action until November. By that time, over 14,000 1st Division men were in Vietnam. Their area of operations was to be a vast portion of central South Vietnam, from the Cambodian border to the South China Sea. Division headquarters was set up 20 miles north of Saigon at Ye An, under Major General Jonathan O. Seaman, first of the 5 commanding generals the Big Red One was to have in Vietnam. The first of the dozens of major battles the division would fight in Vietnam took place at the tiny village of Ap Bao Bang, north of Lai Khe on Highway 13. On a sweep along Highway 13, several units of the 1st were hit by a reinforced Viet Cong regiment. 3 enemy frontal assaults were thrown back by intense small arms fire plus automatic weapons. The fourth and heaviest Viet Cong assault was stopped by 105s, firing at close range. As the weakened enemy fell back, the Air Force was called in to pound their escape routes. In its first engagement in jungle warfare, the men of the Big Red One fought like veterans. There were casualties, but the Viet Cong left 198 dead on the battlefield. It was more than just a victory for the tired infantrymen. It was proof they could defeat a hard-fighting enemy on his own terrain. A few days later, on November 20th, another road convoy turned the tables on a would-be Viet Cong ambush near Trung Loi. The convoy immediately set up a defense perimeter and returned fire. When a gunship drove the enemy from cover, heavy ground fire, especially by the mortar platoon, smashed the trap. The victory at Trung Loi was followed early in December by the biggest and most successful battle of the year. This was Ap Nham Ma, northwest of 3rd Brigade headquarters at Lai Khe. A task force was searching the countryside, eliminating Viet Cong bases, blowing up bunkers and underground factories. When they ran head-on into a fortified base camp defended by 4 battalions of the enemy. A violent firefight broke out immediately. A radio call for fire support brought in deadly concentrations of howitzer fire and repeated tactical airstrikes. After 2 hours of fierce fighting, an infantry assault finally routed the enemy. The Big Red One had its losses, but medevac ambulance helicopters saved many lives by flying in to remove the wounded even as the fighting went on. Patrols grew larger and longer as the division increased its pressure on the elusive enemy. Even so, there was time for mercy missions to the South Vietnamese. Civic action, medical supplies, skilled help, and friendliness to villagers and their children. The beginning of 1966 saw an upsurge of activity by the battle-hardened 1st Division, with armor playing an increasing role in campaigns like Operation Crimp and Rolling Stone, and fierce engagements like those at Tan Binh and Lo Khe, where 1st Division soldiers proved at devastating cost to the enemy that they were masters of the jungle ambush. It was at Lo Khe that the division won its first Medal of Honor in Vietnam in the person of 1st Lieutenant Robert J. Hibbs, whose 15-man patrol chopped up 2 Viet Cong companies. Lieutenant Hibbs was killed when he attacked an enemy machine gun to cover the rescue of one of his wounded soldiers. Under a new commanding general, Major General William E. Depew, who took command in March, the Big Red One lashed out at the enemy in ground drives and air assaults by helicopter. The campaigns were continuous as task forces struck hard throughout the spring, summer, and fall of 1966 in the humid jungle, on dusty roads, in the vast swampy delta of the Rung Sat Special Zone below Saigon. Battle followed battle as sudden, swift probes took the Viet Cong by surprise. Search and clear teams swept through his sanctuaries and hiding places. Armored road marches baited the enemy into would-be ambush traps, then turned the tables with devastating effect. Vast quantities of supplies and weapons were captured as dozens of VC base camps were overrun. The toll of enemy dead and wounded rose. Operation Attleboro alone accounted for over 1,000 North Vietnamese and VC killed. Communist plans for taking the offensive were completely disrupted. By the end of 1966, the men of the Big Red One were experts in the revolutionary new tactics of air-mobile operations, which rushed troops to the battlefield with unprecedented speed and mobility. Division cannoneers set new records for the speed, volume, and accuracy of supporting fires. Coordination with aerial support, either by gunships firing rockets or jet fighter bombers, became a highly polished art. Of great benefit were the lessons learned in how to fight the guerrilla and ambush tactics of the enemy. The Battle of the Minh Thanh Road was a striking example. After very careful planning, a powerful armored column from the 1st Brigade was sent on a road reconnaissance. in order to lure the 272nd Regiment of the crack Viet Cong 9th Division into battle. As expected, the Viet Cong tried to ambush the column. 3 battalions attacked abreast along the entire 1,200-meter length of the convoy. The heavily armed column, ready and waiting, blazed back with everything it had, and it had plenty. While the army held its blocking positions on the road, helicopter-borne infantry was flown in to attack the Viet Cong flanks. Tremendous artillery fire poured in on the numerically superior enemy. Forward air control personnel called in strike after strike, 96 sorties in all. This sustained rain of fire was too much for the Viet Cong. They broke and ran with heavy losses. The Battle of the Minh Thanh Road was a superb example of the combined use of armor and infantry to destroy an enemy ambush. Armor serving as a fixing force to hold the enemy in battle, while infantry battalions maneuvered to hit his rear and flanks. The continuous campaigning of 1966 had familiarized the 1st Division with most of its vast area of operations, kept its lines of communication open, and disrupted enemy efforts to take the initiative. Now, the division was to strike directly into Viet Cong sanctuaries. The target was the Iron Triangle, the vast jungle area which was the enemy's foremost operational base for attacks on Saigon. In January 1967, Operation Cedar Falls was launched. 5 infantry battalions, plus 2 more from the 173rd Airborne Brigade, were airlifted to blocking positions to encircle the objective. Armor closed in to seal off escape routes. The main attack force struck deep inside the enemy-held jungle, so thick in places the Hueys couldn't land, and the men had to descend via rope ladder. They pushed through heavy jungle, thickets and vines, waded through streams, searching for the enemy in village hideouts and underground bunkers. There was resistance as the Viet Cong sought to hold up the advance, but they invariably got the worst of it. 30 artillery batteries laid in devastating fires. Engineer bulldozers moved in to level broad stretches of jungle to deny the VC a future hiding place. One of the most significant results of Cedar Falls was the large number of Viet Cong, 576, who surrendered under the Chu Hoi, or Open Arms Program, which encouraged enemy soldiers to join the government side. With the Iron Triangle made untenable for a while, the Big Red One turned its attention to another Viet Cong stronghold, War Zone C. It was suspected that insurgent headquarters was located north of the city of Tay Ninh. Led by a new commanding general, Major General John H. Hay, who assumed command early in February, the division undertook painstaking preparations for Operation Junction City. Junction City was larger than Cedar Falls and lasted much longer, from February through April. Units from all 3 brigades participated. They were reinforced by troops from other U.S. divisions and separate brigades, plus Rangers from ARVN, the Army of the Republic of South Vietnam. Altogether, 30,000 Allied troops went in to clear out War Zone C. Despite this large force, there were many engagements in which units of the 1st Division were outnumbered. Aggressive patrols lured the enemy into attacking. When contact was established, help was called in. Additional troops rushed in by air, moving with stunning speed to reinforce the embattled defenders. Supporting fires from the ground and from the air blasted the attackers. Helicopters again proved their versatility in many ways, as air artillery, as troop carriers deploying large forces at distances and speeds that constantly took the enemy by surprise, as aerial ambulances rushing the wounded from battlefield to hospital, sometimes in minutes, as supply ships delivering vital cargo right into the hands of soldiers on the battlefield, artillery and ammo, so that the Viet Cong, no matter how far away, was never safe from the destructive fire of the big guns. The result of Operation Junction City was the heaviest loss yet sustained by the enemy. Over 1,800 dead and the veteran 9th Viet Cong Division completely shattered. The Big Red One, hardly pausing, pressed on with more campaigns through the rest of the spring and summer. In Operations Manhattan and Billings, task forces probed into enemy strongholds in the Michelin Trapezoid area and War Zone D. Meanwhile, a different kind of campaign, continuous since its inception in 1966, was operating throughout the entire 1st Division area. This was the Revolutionary Development Program, carried out jointly by Americans and Vietnamese to win the confidence and goodwill of the Vietnamese people, especially in villages suspected of harboring Viet Cong. The procedure was for a task force to move in unexpectedly and seal off the village. Soldiers swiftly established security by checking for mines and booby traps. Psychological warfare specialists with signs and posters explained their mission. The village was thoroughly searched for evidence of Viet Cong activity and suspects taken into custody. Then supplies were brought in, and the villagers were fed and clothed. MedCap, medical missions, were a vital part of the pacification program, bringing badly needed treatment for a variety of ailments. While the Big Red One carried out its missions of peace and war, it also conducted an immense training program. Many of its veteran soldiers and battle leaders had gone home through the Army's yearly rotation program. Yet, thanks chiefly to mobile training teams of combat experienced personnel, the 20,000 men of the division were at a peak of professionalism when the 1st began Operation Shenandoah II, one of its fiercest campaigns, and to many veterans, the most outstanding in the division's 5 years in Vietnam. Shenandoah II was a series of violent battles at far-flung points on both sides of Highway 13, from Lai Khe north to the area around Loc Ninh, near the Cambodian border. From September into November, the fighting raged through jungles, across rubber plantations, through wooded areas, tall grass, and streams. It was often toe-to-toe slugging with the enemy. Night fighting was common, as North Vietnamese and Viet Cong troops attempted futile assaults on the American NDP's night defensive positions. The Big Red One had the advantage of highly mobile armored support and heavy firepower always on call, and fought alongside the South Vietnamese Army units. The result was inevitable, a smashing series of victories that destroyed numerous enemy bases and fortifications and left over 1,000 of his troops dead. The rest retreated to their sanctuaries again, leaving Highway 13 secure. Of the 8 major battles that made the Shenandoah campaign so memorable, one of the most remarkable was the battle for the airstrip at the town of Loc Ninh. ARVN and Special Forces soldiers came in by air assault to drive out the Viet Cong, who held a small sector of the town. They routed the enemy from bunkers and houses in fierce attacks. The insurgents counterattacked time and again, but were thrown back each time. The fighting raged for days as both sides brought in more forces. The high point, however, was at the airstrip, where 1st Division artillery had set up a fire base. The Viet Cong attacked across the airstrip in 3 waves, but were stopped by howitzers, firing at point-blank range. There were many heroes in Operation Shenandoah II. It was a fitting tribute that it was the President of the United States who presented the awards for valor in battle. It was a well-earned respite for the Big Red One when Bob Hope and his USO troop arrived to entertain the division at Christmas. The Viet Cong Tet Offensive that opened 1968 did not take the Big Red One by surprise, since some kind of all-out enemy drive was expected. When the attack struck Saigon and the U.S. Embassy was assaulted, troops were rushed to the city. There was hard fighting. South Vietnamese soldiers did their share. There were casualties and destruction, but the inevitable result was annihilation of the insurgent force. In March, the division resumed its strong offensive tempo under a new leader, Major General Keith L. Ware, famous as a Congressional Medal of Honor winner in World War II. General Ware launched two massive campaigns in areas to the north of Saigon and northwest in the Iron Triangle. The first was Operation Wit Khan, translated as Resolve to Win. The second was Operation Tong Tan, which meant certain victory. The objective of these aggressive campaigns was to smash the enemy's war potential on a vast scale, kill his troops, destroy his base camps and supply dumps, interdict his supply trails and his routes for infiltration, and retreat. The result was a stunning success. Vast quantities of arms and materiel were found in weapons caches or were seized from the enemy, who lost over 2,000 killed. General Ware also initiated Operation Giant Swamp, in which a new tactical concept was applied to the Rome plow, a standard tractor with a special cutting edge for jungle clearing. Hitherto, the Rome plow had been used with great effectiveness to clear large jungle areas used as enemy sanctuaries. In Giant Swath, land-clearing teams used the plow to slice a network of wide trails through 11,000 acres of jungle. Instead of trying to clear the whole vast area, they divided it into many small subdivisions. The Viet Cong camps, hidden in the jungle, were now highly vulnerable to reconnaissance in force operations and to air assault. Another notable move made by General Ware was to step up night ambush patrols so that almost every unit in the division was engaged. This tactic had a devastating effect on the enemy, who had always considered themselves masters of infiltration and attack under cover of darkness. On September 13th, however, the division suffered a heavy blow. General Ware was flying over Loc Ninh, observing a successful counterattack against insurgent efforts to overrun the town for the fourth time. The general's command helicopter was shot down by ground fire. All aboard were killed. He was the fourth American general to be killed in Vietnam. The assistant division commander, Major General Orwin C. Talbot, immediately assumed command of the first, and the drive continued. There was frequent contact with the enemy as strong forces pushed north, carrying out Phase 2 of Operation Certain Victory. Viet Cong resistance was strong, and there was hard fighting as 1st Divisioners conducted several spoiling actions, destroying enemy camps and heavily built bunkers with intense fires supported by artillery. Among the highlights of the drive were several engagements with troops of the 1st North Vietnamese Army Division. These took place immediately across the border from Cambodia's Fishhook area. The Big Red One had established several fire support patrol bases in the area. They were placed astride a main infiltration route used by the North Vietnamese invaders. NVA troops hurled themselves fiercely at the fire bases in repeated night attacks and met devastating fires. They were brave, but the results were always the same. Failure. Many dead. A sidelight of all Big Red One campaigns was the continuing effort to help the South Vietnamese in nation building, working with these ARVN allies in the Revolutionary Development Program. Each village was first made secure by searching it thoroughly for traces of Viet Cong. Leaflets were used extensively to encourage defections to the government side. Civic action programs were put into operation to help the villagers, feeding them, attending to their medical and dental needs. Animals as well as humans were carefully ministered to with the hope that the South Vietnamese could help themselves to attain economic self-sufficiency and to strengthen grassroots government. In 1969, the division continued its tremendous sweeps to keep the enemy off balance. Sometimes it struck from the skies in air-mobile assaults. Sometimes on the ground in a fluid shift of tactics. Armor played a powerful supporting role in these drives to cripple the communist winter-spring offensive. Powerful reconnaissance in force operations struck again and again into the Iron Triangle, the Michelin Trapezoid, War Zone C, and War Zone D. Battles by night, alternated with fighting by day as Viet Cong and North Vietnamese soldiers resisted desperately. Highly trained scout dogs sniffed out the enemy while spotter planes sought him from the air. Enemy dead littered the battlefields. Captured weapons, like this communist-made AK-47 rifle, were plentiful. It wasn't easy. The terrain was often rugged, and so was the fighting. There were casualties, but Medevac was always there to take out the wounded. Sometimes the enemy attacked recklessly, and sometimes he holed up. Then he had to be blown out, or foot soldiers had to go in after them. These volunteers were known as tunnel rats, and no fighting men were more admired for their courage and nerve. Sometimes enemy contact was light, and there was more monotony than action. It was a welcome relief between patrols and sweeps to see the pretty face of a USO entertainer, even if she did bring along a boyfriend. For some Big Red One soldiers, there was a complete change of pace. They became amphibious. In June of '69, the division began to use small fiberglass boats to patrol the river approaches to Saigon. Working in conjunction with Navy patrol craft and shore-based infantry patrols, these ski boats drastically cut down Viet Cong infiltration by water. Elsewhere, the great fighting machine of the 1st Division continued its relentless pursuit of the enemy under its 5th and last commanding general in Vietnam. He was Major General A.E. Malloy. Deploying its vast power with professional precision. Going into battle with the high morale traditional with the Big Red One. Its fighting men struck smashing blows against Viet Cong forces concentrating north of Saigon for an autumn offensive. For the defeated enemy, it was one more bitter lesson in the futility of challenging the 1st Division's enormous battle power and its irresistible will to win. The war in Vietnam was winding down for the Big Red One. Early in 1970, it made its last sweep. Orders had come in to stand down, to prepare for redeployment. Men and vehicles were withdrawn from the field. Much of its equipment and facilities were turned over to ARVN forces. The U.S. Army's program of Vietnamization, under which the South Vietnamese Army increasingly shouldered the burden of combat operations, was proving a success. Large contingents of American troops had already gone home. Now, it was the turn of the Big Red One. Early in April, the division left the last of its bases and returned to Fort Riley, Kansas, almost 5 years after it had gone to Vietnam. April 15, 1970 was another milestone in the long, proud history of the 1st Division. In a colorful, heart-stirring ceremony, watched by many thousands, families, relatives, friends, and dignitaries, including the Secretary of Defense, Melvin R. Laird, the 1st Infantry Division was renamed the 1st Infantry Division, mechanized. It had a new commanding general, Major General Robert R. Linville, and it had new troops. Its ranks were filled with the men from another famous fighting outfit, the 24th Infantry Division, which was deactivated. Under its new designation of mechanized, the 1st Division was augmented with additional armor, reflecting the vast increase in firepower and mobility of the modern U.S. Army Infantry Division. The 1st had a new mission, too, to support our commitment to NATO in defense of the free world. New faces, new strength, a new mission, but all of it steeped in a time-honored, hallowed tradition of service to country. And now, after almost 2 centuries of valorous battle deeds, the 1st Division looks ahead, confident that it will carry out its future tasks in the spirit of its motto: no mission too difficult, no sacrifice too great. Duty first.